India is a land of farmers. With a population of almost 1.5 billion people, it always was, is, and will be a challenge to feed the population. And this is where the Indian farmers play an important role. Almost 60% of India's families are dependent on agriculture for their sustenance. And Indian agriculture, in turn, is largely dependent on the Indian monsoons. The monsoons in most part of the country begin in the month of June and continues up to the mid of October, with irrigated agriculture limited to only 55% of the gross sown area. The Indian monsoons are the single most important factor in the lives of the Indian farmer, especially the small and marginal Indian farmer. Every year, perhaps the most important news that the whole country waits with bated breath are the forecasts of the monsoon, for not just the farmer but for the whole country. The whole economy of the country takes a beating if there is a bad or a weak monsoon. The Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana National Rural Livelihood Mission, or DAY NRLM, is the country's flagship program on poverty alleviation. Under this program, rural communities are being organized into multiple layers of community-based organizations like the self-help groups, the village organizations, and the apex body, which is also known as the cluster level federation. The cluster level federations, to be able to provide high quality services to its rural members, requires a very competent and motivated staffs. The CLF's HR, like the manager, the accountant, and the MIS operative, need to be cognizant and appreciative of the way the rural families live their lives and take their decisions. This training is geared towards preparing the cluster level federation staffs for their roles and responsibilities in the federation. And towards this end, as part of the orientation training, these staffs of the CLF are going to participate in a simulation game called MONSOON, which helps the participants to understand the farmer level challenges and their decision making process. This video presentation has been prepared to help all the potential trainers to understand how to facilitate a simulation game which is intended to enhance understanding and appreciation of how farmers live their lives dependent on monsoons and their decision making. So first, let's talk about how this game is played. The monsoon requires the following people to play the game. This game can be played with 27 to 45 participants, but the ideal participant size is around 30 to 35 people. Often 3 to 4 players can form one family. You need one game organizer. You need 2 assistants for the organizer. You need around 7 to 12 families of at least 3 members each. You need one moneylender and a goon or a gunda to assist the moneylender. You need one development worker and one newspaper reporter. Please remember that if there are less than 25 players in your training, then you just need one assistant organizer, and also you can lessen the additional roles that of the reporter and the observer per family can also be dispensed with. The minimum number of families that you require to play the game is 7, and if required because of low attendance, the number of players in each family can be reduced to 2 members. Generally, it is very helpful if the game organizer has also played the monsoon game himself or herself, or has some experience of facilitating simulations and other group exercises. Needless to say, there is a manual to this game, and the game organizer and the assistants should be very thorough with the manual before they get down to facilitating this game. Another important point to remember is that the moneylender and the gunda, or the actors who play these roles, must be very well briefed, as these are not very popular roles, and therefore the persons chosen to play them should be ready to enter into these roles, because these roles will be very effective if they are made to feel part of the organizing team along with the organizer and the assistants. The game organizer can actually keep a copy of the manual with him or her while facilitating this game, so that it becomes easy for him and his assistants. To play this game, you're going to need a large room with unfixed chairs for each player. And it would be good to have tables for each family, as there are lots of calculations to be done. The game organizer or the game manager needs to stand in a place where she or he can be surrounded by all the families, and she or he should speak in a voice which is loud enough for everybody to hear. If required, you can also use mics. Please remember that India is a diverse country, and this game has been designed keeping in mind a village in the south of India where some crops might seem new to the participants. For example, In the game, we talk about ragi, which is a crop typically grown in South India, but it might not be understood in areas, for example, like the Northeast. So if you want, you can change the name of the crop if you think that helps in facilitating the game, or you'll have to explain the same thing to the participants so that they're able to play the game properly without getting caught up with crop names. Before beginning the game, the organizer should introduce himself or herself and the assistants, and also the development worker, the moneylender, the gunda and the reporter. This helps in breaking the initial wall of discomfort and also lessens the anxiety amongst the players. Each family should elect the head of the family to speak or represent the family in village meetings. Remember, the rule is that no one else should speak with members of other families or with the game organizer and the assistant organizers. This is a practical necessity because many times there is a lot of unnecessary shouting and confusion around the game, which lessens the potential of the game to teach the participants. So kindly do this. Now let's understand the game cycles. You can play this game for a minimum of 7 years. The game generally follows this cycle. There is a single bell and the families begin to plan their crops for the current year, the number of plots or land that they would be utilizing for sowing, the kind of crops they want to grow, and record it in the annual planning sheet. They then wait for the game organizer to announce the kind of monsoon which is going to happen for the year. It could be a good monsoon, bad monsoon, or an average monsoon. Additionally, there are other announcements also which impact the final produce. For example, there could be pest attacks or there could be disease attacks on the crops which will impact the final output, which needs to be recorded in the recording sheet. Once the monsoon and the related conditions are announced, the families will then record their outputs based on the charts which have been prepared before the training and have been pasted on the wall, and record the same in their annual sheet. Post this recording, the game assistants will go around and check whether the correct calculations have been made or not, and they will sign on the document if they find the calculations are correct. If there are any problems, they will help the families correct those problems. Now let us understand malnourishment cards. It is common knowledge that the food that a farmer grows is also used to feed their family. The game also has a system of bringing this factor in. It stipulates a minimum amount of food units that needs to be grown by every family. If at the end of the annual calculations, any family falls beyond the minimum range of food units, then that family will have to pick up either a mild malnourishment card or a high malnourishment card. There is a task written at the back of the card which needs to be performed by that family. Important point. If there are any agreements which have been entered into by multiple families for exchange of grains or for that matter exchange of any other items they need to survive, this needs to be done in writing with the signature of both the participating families in the document. Without this, the game master or the game organizer would not recognize any such transactions. So let's take a look at the charts that you need to prepare before the game begins. So this is the first chart, chart number 1. You can see the number of families which has been written in the first column, and then you can see the details of the number of fields that each family has. And out of that, if you see further onto the third column, you see that out of the total number of fields, there are some which are irrigated and some which are unirrigated. And then there are daughters and sons in a family. Why is this chart important? This chart is important because here it gives you the total detail of the kind of irrigated fields that everybody is going to have, and that would determine how much produce they are going to produce at the end of the year. The moneylender is the most well endowed in terms of land, has got 15 units of land, and also has a cash of 2000 which may be used for lending out into the village if required. So this is the first chart. Let's look at the second chart. This is the second chart, chart number 2, and you can see the first column shows the 4 kinds of crops: paddy, maize, groundnut and ragi. And in case ragi, if it is not grown in the area where you are going to train, you can use any millet instead of ragi. So it's only for the case of paddy where you have an option of irrigated and unirrigated. As per norms, irrigated paddy, whether it is poor, average or good, yes, the last 3 columns are the kind of monsoons that you're going to have. So irrigated paddy will always be better than unirrigated paddy, but each family needs to decide this before they begin the year. Similarly, all the other 3 crops also have the 3 different scenarios which have been built into this chart. This chart also has to be prepared before the training and pasted on a place where people can look at it and refer to it while making the calculations. Let's come down to chart number 3. This chart is about the different scenarios with the number of grain units available to the family. After they have calculated what they've grown in a year, they will see and check which category do they belong to. If they have got anything less than 301, which is just about enough to eat but no surplus, anything below that would mean that they would be either mildly malnourished with a risk of mild disease, or if it is less than even 200, then it will be severe malnourishment with a risk of serious disease. If there is any family with severe malnourishment for 3 consecutive years, there is going to be a death in the family because of starvation. And that death would also mean more expenses. Let's go on to the next chart. This chart is the annual sheet that a family has to fill up. This looks something like this. As you can see, there are these years which are there, and then there is a choice of crops. People have to choose how much land they are going to invest in which crop, and then they have to fill up these columns for each year and then calculate the surplus which has been carried forward to the next year. This is going to be repeated every year, and therefore you can see these years being marked. So for 7 years you will require another sheet, 2 more sheets to which you need to distribute to the family. Finally, the last chart. As you can see, all the family members have been written, and the game master has to keep note of what is happening to the families at the end of every year. If all this seems very complicated to you, do not worry. There is a manual for you to refer to in case you get stuck, which should help you out. So go through the module, remember your own experience of playing this game. I'm sure you'll have a great time facilitating this game with your fellow participants. Till then, bye-bye.